Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. Well, some of you were so excited by our endless list of conductors that you begged me to do another one. And I was trying to think of a reason to do another one, actually, because they are fun. I mean, I've been having a great time doing it. And I decided to take the easy way out. I'm sorry. I mean, sometimes, rather than agonizing over, conductors who only worked on Tuesday or, who were specialists and such or whatever, we can make lists, endlessly if we define the criteria narrowly enough. But in this particular case, I thought I would let you determine the parameters. And so here we have viewer's choice. 16 important conductors not on any list until now. These are people that you added, that you thought belonged on one of the other lists for whatever reason, and they didn't get mentioned. They got left off. And so I think actually this is a very, very interesting list of people. And they're all things that I have figured out came from your comments. And I'm just delighted that we have your comments. So let me just figure out, let me see, I just accidentally put this in the wrong spot. So I have my list here. There we are. And here we go with viewer's choice. Oh, isn't that interesting? Let's begin at the beginning with an A. Armin Jordan. Really a very fine conductor. He made all those recordings for Arado. He didn't have a major label contract, but he did a lot of French repertoire that a lot of other people were doing, admittedly. But he did most of it very, very well. He was just a really good all-around conductor. He belongs on a list somewhere. So Armin Jordan gets us started. Next, on the opera list, a lot of you were very, very kind and mentioned Valery Gergiev. And I was really thinking of putting him on the opera list. I just left him off because I forgot to put him on the opera list. He belongs there. He really does, because of his wonderful series of Russian operas. I mean, you did Mussorgsky and Borodin and Prokofiev and Rimsky-Korsakov. I mean, that's basically, and some Tchaikovsky too. These were really, really important recordings because they brought to all of us on a major label repertoire which before we had only been able to hear either in dim melodia recordings from God knows when, or from Bulgaria or some other Soviet satellite country. They really established these pieces, not necessarily in the repertoire here, but they made the case. And they're, for the most part, wonderful recordings, and he deserves full credit for that. So absolutely, Gergiev should have been on a list. Charles Dutoit also should have been on a list. He's one of the, sexual peccadillo people. And these sexual peccadillo people have been somewhat erased from our consciousness, but I've never had a problem talking about Dutoit. His legacy in Montreal is a major one with many first-class recordings. And so, his other stuff for Arado, remember he did Roussel symphonies, Honegger symphonies. They were very workaday. And they sort of, I blew a little cooler on Charles Dutoit after that because the Montreal stuff was really very good. This other stuff was really very mediocre. And he never had much of a personality as an interpreter, I don't think. I mean, you really couldn't hear any particular performance and say, that's Dutoit. Although he did cultivate a certain sound in Montreal and got it from his engineers. So Dutoit, because of his recorded legacy, certainly belongs on the list. And then there's Hannu Lintu. I love Hannu Lintu, Finnish conductor. There's a whole Finnish conductor mafia, as you know. They were all trained by Jorma Pannula, who is not himself a terrific conductor, but who's a terrific conductor, teacher of conductors. And so, there's this, the Finnish invasion of conductors, which is currently going on. And several have already appeared here, and some more are going to be on this list, actually. A couple anyway. Lintu means bird, by the way, in case you're curious. Hannu Lintu is interesting. He always dresses in black. He has a very mean-looking dog, and cultivates some kind of rather creepy persona. But he's a very good conductor, and he appears on Ondine and Bis and all those Scandinavian labels, and he's done some pretty exciting work. So why not toss him on the list? And Daniele Gatti, speaking of sexual peccadillo people, he lost his job at the Concertgebouw because of his supposed alleged, sexual whatever. But he's back, and he'll be back. They'll all be back at one point or another. We'll give them a few years to like hide in their cave, and then they'll emerge like the what you call them, the cicadas or whatever, the cicadas or no cicadas, right? Those insects that pop up every 17 years or so. Well, if Dutoit is in brood 7, then Gatti is in brood 9. So his emergence is probably due once he's done pupating or whatever is happening with him now. He made some good records. Remember, originally in the UK, some of them, the Tchaikovsky on Harmonia Mundi, which was marvelous, and some other recordings. He did some Mahler stuff for, what label was that? It was Conifer, or some strange label like that. And they were also, some of them very good, some of them not so good. But he's a conductor of evident ability, so he will no doubt emerge. The same thing is true. No, that's the same thing is true. He was not one of the sexual peccadillo people. Fabio Luisi, not even close. He has had a very, very estimable career and has made some lovely recordings for some fairly obscure labels. But most recently, he did that Nielsen cycle in Denmark, which wasn't bad. It was a little insensitive, and the sonics weren't the best, but it was okay. And he's a good workman-like conductor type person, and we're still waiting to see if he emerges as somebody really, really important, somebody who's worth following. At the moment, he's just doing decent work. And there's something to be said for that. After Fabio Luisi, David Robertson. David Robertson is a splendid conductor. I mean, I saw him at the Met a couple of times. He's made wonderful recordings, but mostly of contemporary music. That's his specialty. And because he's a contemporary music guy, he shows up on strange labels and doesn't get as much attention as he probably deserves. But he's extremely talented, and hopefully will at some point have an opportunity to reveal his credentials in a more generalist type way. So David Robertson was on your list. Oh, Rinaldo Alessandrini. I always wanted to stick him on a list. I just like him, So I'm glad he popped up somewhere in some comment somewhere. Alessandrini, of course, is a Baroque guy. He's a keyboardist who also conducts. He was trained by Gustav Leonhardt, and among others. And he's very gifted. He made his big splash on the Opus 111 label, Jolanta Skura's label, which is now owned by Naive, and doing all kinds of early music stuff, everything from Monteverdi on up, and very excitingly and passionately. And he's really a very fine group leader. You wouldn't want to call him a conductor, maybe, because they didn't have conductors in those days for the music that he was doing, but he's made some outstanding recordings. Oh my goodness. So we should mention him. Gerd Albrecht. Now, Gerd Albrecht is one of those, there are a couple on this list. I actually get confused, but Gerd Albrecht did a lot of unusual opera. Really, really well. I mean, he did Dvorak's Dmitri and, stuff like that, Dvorak operas, and all kinds of wonderful, interesting repertoire. Some of it recorded for Supraphon, some of it recorded on Orfeo. He actually was conductor of the Czech Philharmonic, people forget, but apparently at the time that Václav Havel was president and the political things were happening, and he didn't want to do something, and there was a whole imbroglio, a political imbroglio, and he wound up leaving the Czech Philharmonic, which was unfortunate because he made some first-class recordings. He really did, and especially of stuff that we wouldn't otherwise have heard, especially in such fine performances. A very musicianly conductor and an interesting conductor. So Gerd Albrecht belongs on the list, and he shows up on all kinds of labels. I mean, he did Pedersen symphonies, he did all kinds of interesting things. Richard Bonynge. Well, Bonynge, you guys keep mentioning him. And he is a fine conductor. He became a fine conductor. He started out as Mr. Joan Sutherland, basically as somebody who prepped his wife and who recorded with her because she insisted that he get the job if they were going to get her. And she was smart to do that because, he was sensitive. He cared about showing her off in the best light, and also he loved the repertoire that she was doing. They did it together. They were a real team, and they revived all kinds of bel canto opera and, of course, Bonynge's ballet stuff that nobody else was doing. And as I said, as time went on, he became a better and better conductor and really sort of learned to have some dynamism and do some interesting things. So for the interest of the repertoire, as much as his ability to pull it off in concert, which was not inconsiderable, he certainly belongs on the list. Hugh Wolff. Hugh Wolff was my glee club conductor when I was at Johns Hopkins, and he was just a young'un. I mean, I guess he was a little older than I was, nonetheless, but Hugh Wolff is terrific. He was, I think it was Rostropovich's assistant at the National Symphony, but he got the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra after a while, and then went to Europe, and he recorded like the Antheil symphonies and all kinds of interesting things in Frankfurt with, for CPO. I think it was Frankfurt. I've got stuff with him right here. Here we go. Look. Antheil symphonies. Here we are. No, that's Marcus Becker and EGOA. Like the symphonies. Here we go. Hugh Wolff. There he is. There he is. Look at that with the Frankfurt Radio Symphony Orchestra. He's a very good conductor. Does interesting repertoire. All kinds of nifty things. His recordings are worth seeking out. And after Hugh Wolff, Kent Nagano. Now, I used to see Kent Nagano when he was leading the Berkeley Symphony when I was a grad student at Stanford. And we used to go over there. And Nagano was an amazingly talented guy. He really is. And he could conduct anything, the most complicated contemporary stuff. And I saw a fabulous concert that consisted of something at the beginning, and then the Nielsen Clarinet Concerto and Ives' Fourth Symphony, and he did the version for one conductor where, one hand is in 4 and the other hand is in 6/pi, or I don't know. He was sitting there like doing semaphore with his hands, and the orchestra's going crazy. Oh my gosh, that was really fun. And the Berkeley Symphony was not exactly a major ensemble, and it did not have, thousands of people, but he pulled these things off, these crazy programs. And then he, became a normal conductor of like big orchestras and did a very good, like Mahler Eighth. He did Bernstein's Mass. He's also sort of a contemporary music guy. He's really, really, really talented. His Mahler Das Klagende Lied in the original version, which was on Erato of all things, and he did it with the Halle, I believe, in Manchester. It was really, really fantastic performance. So Nagano is somebody who deserves to be on a list. Thomas Hengelbrock. When was the last time you thought of him, huh? He's a period music guy, an original instrument guy, but a very, very good one. He's better than a lot of the more famous ones, I think. And his discography is really distinguished, and it all goes all the way up to, weird versions of Mahler's First and Dvorak's Fourth Symphony and things like that he does with great freshness and a certain lack of pedantry that I find quite refreshing. And his Baroque things like his B minor Mass and whatnot, are just marvelous. Absolutely marvelous. Haydn creation and things like that. He was mostly, I think, on Deutsche Harmonia Mundi. But he's popped up on some other labels besides, and definitely a musical mind is at work there, and it's worth following. David Porcelijn, whatever his last name is, he's Dutch, and he does all kinds of weird modern Dutch stuff, like Julius Röntgen and people like that. And he does it so well. I don't think he's ever made a bad record. No matter how weird the repertoire or how complicated it is, he does extremely fine work. You can find him on CPO and other labels like ABC Classics and some strange Dutch labels and things like that. But oh my goodness, his work is always, always rewarding in my experience. Sakari Oramo, another one of the Finnish mobsters. Yeah, I was not really all that impressed with his work. He was in Birmingham and did things like that. I think he did his usual homage to Sibelius that Finnish people have to do, whether they like him or not. But he did a Nielsen cycle. Whoa, in Sweden, recorded for BIS, which is the Nielsen cycle to own. It's absolutely phenomenal. And he's a guy who's well worth keeping your eye out for now. Something's happening there. I'm not quite sure what. We'll see if he gets to record what's happening there and if it's all sustained. But boy, his that Nielsen cycle is awfully impressive. Really, really, really cool. And then after him, who else is our last guy? Is this the last one? It is Werner Andreas Albrecht. Now, Werner Andreas Albrecht is kind of like Gerd Albrecht, and I always get them mixed up, and I really shouldn't. I mean, that's not nice of me, but what can I tell you? You know, I don't know. There's something about the names that kind of Albert and Albrecht, you know, they're kind of similar. Anyway, he's kind of like Albrecht in that he does a tremendous amount of unusual repertoire, and he did it very persuasively. He was the power behind that huge Hindemith edition on CPO, which was really, really important, the complete orchestral music. He's another unusual music conductor, and he was sort of the house conductor for CPO at the beginning of their career. And there's just a wonderful legacy of interesting stuff from Werner Andreas Albrecht. Didn't he also do the Korngold box too? All those strange German fin de siècle, early 20th century guys. I don't know. I just know that when he does something, it's likely to be pretty damn fine. So there you have it. 16 fabulous or interesting or worth watching conductors, all of whom you mentioned. Well, maybe Hannu Lintu was someone I mentioned. I just like him because he's kind of creepy looking. But, you know, it's a good list, a wonderful list that I would never have put together had it not been for you. And now, before we sign off on this particular conductors thing, and I'm not saying it's the last, who knows what you'll come up with and inspire me to put together, because this has all been a result, not just this list, of your giving me suggestions, which I'm more than happy to accept. No, there's one list of conductors that I wanted you to have a look at. It's an older video, and I'm putting a link to it below this video. Because it's on one of my obsessions, which is performance practice. I did a video a couple years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, about what conductors who lived to the LP era tell us about performance practice, and particularly the use of vibrato in the orchestra and all of these stupid things that these early music people are insisting upon. And it consists of a list of 52 conductors, all of whom were born in the 19th century, but who lived to make LPs in the 20th century of their core repertoire. And it's something that we tend to forget. It fascinates me, actually, that I've seen books written about performance practice based on early recordings where people listen to creaky 78s and electrical recordings for tiny details about orchestral practice and whatnot. And it's also ridiculous because they completely ignore stereo recordings by the artists who actually knew Brahms and Mahler, these people. It blows my mind. It really does, just how the selective use of evidence can be deployed in furtherance of some absolutely anti-musical and scholarly dubious scheme. So I thought I would, take a crack at it, and there it is. It's a wonderful list of 52 conductors, all of whom were born before 1900, and so would have grown up and been conscious of what allegedly 19th century performance practice really was, and all of whom lived to the LP era and made records. And so we know what the answer is. It's not like there's anything speculative about it. And we know that the period instrument people are wrong. So I've given you the whole sort of thing, but it's a fun video. And you'll see the list of names is really quite interesting. So I put a link to it down there because I didn't want that to be just vanish into the general sphere of nebulous videodom. Have a look at it if you have a chance. I think you'll find it intriguing. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.